Olivia here, and I'm 29 years old. I've been working as an event planner for the past 5 years. I've planned birthday parties, anniversaries, weddings, you name it. Although it's not what I had anticipated doing when I was younger, life has a strange way of taking you by surprise. In college, I studied economics, but it wasn't my passion. I became interested in planning entertaining and educational activities on campus throughout my stay there. I started off small, leading study groups and movie nights here and there. But before I knew it, I was the guy who was called upon to organize any kind of event. I knew I wouldn't be happy crunching figures in an office after graduation, so I took a risk and launched my own event organizing company. At first, it wasn't simple. I had to start my reputation from zero by accepting any job that came my way. Even though I was stressed about paying the rent that month, I would cheerfully tell prospective clients that no event is too small. But news got out, slowly but certainly. Before I realized it, I had more work than I could manage after serving one happy client after another. 5 years passed quickly, and now I have a successful business and a solid reputation. I'm seated across from Mr. Johnson today. He's a prosperous businessman who turns 50 next month. He wants a party to remember, and I'm going to make sure he gets one. I take out my notebook and say, "So, Mr. Johnson, what were your plans for your big day?" With a contemplative expression on his face, he reclines in his chair. "Well, I was envisioning something elegant, perhaps a Grand Hotel black tie event." I nod and start taking notes. What a fantastic location. We may adopt a vintage Hollywood motif, complete with a red carpet arrival and paparazzi-style photographers. I'm speaking when my phone buzzes. I look at it, about to dismiss the call, but I hesitate when I see the name on the screen. Sarah, my sister, is here. I suppose I should now give some background on my family. It's not simple. Sarah, my younger sister, is 7 years younger than myself. She has always been our parents' favorite child. Please understand that although my parents also looked after me, there was always a difference in their treatment of us. My grandmother, bless her soul, stepped in to help when they couldn't find the money to support me while I was in college. However, when Sarah entered college a few years later, my parents found themselves suddenly able to afford both her tuition and a rented residence. I won't lie, it hurt. I've come to terms with it over time, but it's still been there. Seeing Sarah's name on my phone surprises me because I don't communicate with my family very much these days. I apologize, Mr. Johnson, as I get to my feet. Please pardon me for a moment. It's my sister, and she doesn't usually call. He smiles politely and waves me off. Take your time, of course. I exit the room and pick up the phone. Sarah, how are things going? Olivia. Her tone is lively and animated. You must see Mom and Dad as soon as possible. We have exciting news. I groan, realizing how foolish this was. All right, I promise to arrive as quickly as I can. I hang up and walk back to Mr. Johnson, expressing my sincere regret. I apologize, but I need to attend to a family emergency. Shall we try again tomorrow? Luckily, he is understanding. I have a knot in my gut as I make my way to my parents' house. I hadn't visited in months, and I wasn't really excited about this last-minute family get-together. My mother answered the doorbell with a fake smile on her face when I called. "Come in, Olivia, please." The family room was packed. My dad was seated in his favorite armchair. Sarah was virtually bouncing with excitement as she sat on the couch. Beside her stood a man I didn't know, roughly my age, and he had a kind smile on his face. "Olivia." Sarah leaped to her feet, took the man by the hand, and dragged him towards her. "This is my fiancé, Mark." Surprised, I blinked. "Fiancé? Okay, congrats." Although Mark appeared to be a decent guy, I couldn't help but wonder how long they had been dating. Sarah had never spoken of him previously. I turned to face Sarah and said, "So, is this why you called me over? To have a meeting with Mark?" Sarah grinned more broadly. "Yeah, in part, but in more detail." Almost bouncing, she clenched her hands together. "Please organize our upcoming engagement celebration. It's almost here." There was a sinking sensation in my gut. "Oh, Sarah, I'm not sure. I have a lot on my plate right now." "Irrelevant." Suddenly, my father spoke up, his tone rough. "We are discussing your sister here. Family is the most important thing." I swallowed a response about how, in my time of need, my family hadn't come first. I faked a smile instead. "Dad, it's not that easy. I owe other clients something. You're the greatest at this stuff, though," Sarah persisted. "And my dream engagement party is going to be the best ever. It will be free, of course. Would you really charge your own sister?" I noticed expectant faces as I glanced around the room. Mark appeared to think that I wouldn't be doing this for nothing. I thought I was cornered. "All right," I at last murmured, my voice straining. "I'll do the organizing for free. However, you will be responsible for paying for the venue, cuisine, decorations, music, and any other costs." Sarah gave me a hug and squealed, "Olivia, you're the greatest. We pledge to cover any other expenses." An hour later, having listened to Sarah's elaborate plans for the ideal engagement party, I felt a mix of remorse and acceptance as I left the house. I would have to give Mr. Johnson a call in order to postpone our meeting. A lucrative deal vanished. I took up my phone when I got home and contacted Mr. Johnson. "It's Olivia, Mr. Johnson. I'm very sorry, but it looks like I won't be able to host your birthday celebration. There's a family duty to attend to. In addition, my buddy Lisa is a fantastic event planner. If you would want, I can provide you her contact information." I apologized again and gave Lisa's information before hanging up. I felt a knot in my stomach as I gazed at my phone. I had recently declined a big customer for a work for which I wasn't even compensated. The next few weeks were a whirlwind of planning and preparations. I secured a beautiful restaurant for the date Sarah wanted. It wasn't easy. The place was popular and usually booked months in advance, but Tony, the owner, couldn't resist my pressure. I worked with the chef to create a spread that would impress even the most discerning guests. Then came the decorations, the music, the invitations. Every detail had to be perfect. I called my go-to DJ, Mike, to book him for the event. He agreed, albeit reluctantly. I had similar conversations with all my usual contractors, the florist, the cake baker, the photographer. They all trusted me enough to agree to delayed payment, but I could sense their unease. As the days passed, I found myself turning down other jobs to focus on Sarah's party. It was eating into my income, but I told myself it would be worth it to see my sister happy. Finally, with everything arranged, I sat down to create the invoice. I carefully itemized every expense, from the venue rental to the last flower in the centerpieces. The total was substantial. I took a deep breath and emailed the invoice to Sarah. "There," I muttered to myself. "All done." That evening, my phone rang. It was Sarah. "Hey, sis," I answered. "Did you get the invoice?" There was a moment of silence. Then Sarah's voice came through, sickly sweet. "Olivia, darling, there must be some mistake. Why are you sending me a bill?" I frowned, confused. "What do you mean? It's the invoice for all the expenses for your engagement party. Remember, you said you'd cover everything except my fee." Sarah laughed, a sound that sent chills down my spine. "Oh, Olivia, I thought you understood. You're supposed to pay for all of this. You make so much money with your business." I was speechless. My mind raced, thinking of all the vendors waiting to be paid, all the promises I'd made based on Sarah's word. "Sarah, listen to me," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "I organized this for free, which is already a huge favor. I can't pay for everything else, too. You promised." but Sarah had already hung up. I tried calling my parents, hoping they could talk some sense into Sarah, but to my horror, they took her side. They insisted I should pay, that it was my duty as the successful daughter. I hung up, my hands shaking with anger and disbelief. How could they do this to me? How could they expect me to bankrupt myself for a party? As I sat there trying to figure out what to do, a notification popped up on my phone. It was a post from Sarah on social media. Curious, I clicked on it. "Can't wait for tomorrow's engagement party." The post read, "So excited to celebrate with everyone. We've spent so much to make it perfect." In that moment, something snapped inside me. If Sarah wanted to play games, well, two could play at that. My fingers trembled as I dialed the restaurant's number. It was late, but I knew Tony would still be there, closing up after the night's service. "Tony, it's Olivia. I'm so sorry, but I need to cancel tomorrow's event. I'll pay you a cancellation fee and I'll make this up to you, I swear." Tony sighed. "All right, Olivia, I trust you, but this isn't like you." One by one, I called all the vendors, the florist, the DJ, the cake baker, everyone. Each call was painful, each explanation more humiliating than the last. By the time I finished, my savings account was significantly lighter, but at least my professional relationships were intact. I paid everyone their fees and cancellation charges out of my own pocket. I barely slept that night. When morning came, I made myself a strong cup of coffee and settled in front of my computer. I knew Sarah would be live streaming her arrival at the restaurant. I wanted to see this. Right on schedule, Sarah's beaming face appeared on my screen. She was outside the restaurant, surrounded by a group of excited-looking friends and family members. "We're here," Sarah chirped into her phone camera. "I can't wait to show you guys everything. It's going to be amazing." I watched as she confidently strolled up to the restaurant doors, her fiancé Mark in tow. She reached for the handle, still chattering away to her viewers. "And here Oh. The smile froze on Sarah's face as she tugged at the door. It didn't budge. "That's weird," she laughed nervously, trying again. "It must be stuck." But it wasn't stuck. Sarah's eyes widened as she finally noticed the sign on the door. "Event canceled." In big letters. The live stream erupted in confused comments. Sarah's face paled as she turned to Mark, who looked equally bewildered. I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction as I watched the chaos unfold. It was petty, I knew, but after years of being the family doormat, it felt good to finally stand up for myself. My phone started buzzing almost immediately. Sarah's name flashed on the screen. I took a deep breath and answered. "Hello, Sarah." "Olivia!" she screeched. "What the hell is going on? The restaurant is closed. Everything's ruined." I kept my voice calm. "Well, Sarah, since you refused to pay for the event you asked me to organize, I had to cancel it. I couldn't let my contractors go unpaid." But what about the food?" Mark's voice came through faintly in the background. "Where's all the food we were supposed to have?" I couldn't help but smile a little. "Oh, the food? I donated it to a homeless shelter. At least someone will enjoy it." More screaming followed, but I'd had enough. I hung up the phone. About 10 minutes later, my phone rang again. My mother's voice came through shrill and angry. "Olivia, how could you do this to your sister? We raised you better than this." I felt a surge of frustration. "Mom, did Sarah tell you what she tried to do? She wanted me to pay for everything." "So what?" My father's voice boomed in the background. "You're doing well for yourself. You could have helped your sister out." I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "Dad, we're talking about thousands of dollars here. I'm not made of money." "You're just being selfish," my mother snapped. "Your poor sister is heartbroken. Her special day is ruined because of your greed." I tried to stay calm, but their words were cutting deep. Greed? I organized everything for free. I even paid cancellation fees out of my own pocket, but they weren't listening. My mother's next words felt like a slap in the face. You know what I think? She said, her voice cold. I think you did this because you're jealous. You're almost 30, Olivia. No husband, no children. You couldn't stand to see her getting married while you have no one. I hung up the phone, my hand shaking. Tears stung my eyes, but I refused to let them fall. How dare they? How dare they twist this around and make me the villain? As I sat there trying to process everything that had happened, an idea struck me. If Sarah and Mark had promised to pay for everything, where did that money go? They must have had it, right? I opened my laptop and drafted an email. In it, I detailed all the expenses I had incurred, including the cancellation fees. I demanded that Sarah and Mark reimburse me for every penny. If you don't pay, I wrote, my fingers flying over the keyboard, I'll be forced to take legal action. I hit send before I could second-guess myself. It was a bold move, I knew, but I was done being the family pushover. Within minutes, my phone was buzzing again. This time it was a barrage of text messages from Sarah and Mark. I steeled myself and opened them. The messages were a mix of threats and insults. Sarah called me every name in the book while Mark threatened to ruin me if I tried to take them to court. I saved screenshots of every message. If this did end up in court, I wanted all the evidence I could get. I also needed advice from someone who might have some insight into Sarah's fiancé and his family. That's when I remembered my Aunt Linda. She always seemed to know all the town gossip. Maybe she could tell me something about Mark and his family. I dialed her number, hoping she'd be willing to talk. Aunt Linda, it's Olivia. I need to ask you something about Sarah's fiancé. Aunt Linda's voice crackled through the phone, warm and familiar. Olivia, dear, it's been ages. What do you want to know about Mark? I took a deep breath. Well, I was wondering if you knew anything about his family, their financial situation. Oh, honey, Aunt Linda chuckled. You're asking the right person. The Thompsons, that's Mark's family, are quite well off. They own a chain of laundromats across the city, and word is they've got their fingers in some lucrative real estate deals, too. I felt my jaw drop. Wait, what? They're wealthy? Oh, yes, very much so, Aunt Linda continued, oblivious to my shock. Why, I heard they gave Mark a hefty sum to arrange that engagement party, $30,000 if the rumors are true. My mind was reeling. $30,000, and they had tried to make me pay for everything? After hanging up, I sat in stunned silence for a few minutes. Then determination set in. I knew what I had to do next. It took some digging, but I managed to find the address of Mark's parents. Without giving myself time to second-guess my decision, I got in my car and drove there. The house was impressive, a large, well-maintained property in one of the nicest neighborhoods in town. I took a deep breath and rang the doorbell. A middle-aged woman answered, her eyebrows raised in curiosity. Can I help you? Mrs. Thompson, I asked. When she nodded, I continued. I'm Olivia, Sarah's sister. I need to talk to you and your husband about Mark and the engagement party. She looked surprised but invited me in. Soon I was sitting in their living room, facing both of Mark's parents. Mr. and Mrs. Thompson, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. I'm here because I think you should know what happened with the engagement party. Over the next half hour, I explained everything. How Sarah had asked me to organize the party for free. How they had promised to pay for everything else but then refused. How I had been forced to cancel everything and pay the cancellation fees myself. As I spoke, I saw the shock and dismay growing on their faces. When I finished, there was a long silence. Finally, Mr. Thompson spoke, his voice tight with anger. We gave Mark $30,000 for this party. He told us everything was paid for. I felt a wave of relief wash over me. They believed me. Mr. Thompson left the room and returned a few minutes later with his checkbook. He wrote out a check for the full amount I had spent, plus a little extra for my trouble. "It's the least we can do," he said, handing it to me. "And don't worry, we'll be having a very serious conversation with Mark and Sarah about their behavior." As I left their house, I felt a mix of emotions: relief, vindication, but also sadness. This whole ordeal had exposed some ugly truths about my sister and her fiancé. On the drive home, my phone buzzed with texts. It was Sarah and Mark again, but this time their tone was very different. Gone were the threats and insults, replaced by panicked apologies and pleas for forgiveness. In the weeks that followed, I heard through the grapevine about the fallout from my visit to the Thompsons. Aunt Linda kept me updated. "You won't believe this, Olivia," she said during one of our phone calls. "Mark's parents have cut him off completely. No more monthly allowance, no financial support for the wedding, nothing." I couldn't help but feel a twinge of satisfaction. "Really? That's quite drastic." Aunt Linda's voice lowered conspiratorially. "Oh, honey, they were furious. Apparently they don't take kindly to being lied to and having their money misused. Can't say I blame them." I nodded, even though she couldn't see me. "What about the wedding? Is it still happening?" There was a pause, then Aunt Linda chuckled. "Well, that's the kicker. Without Mommy and Daddy's money, Mark and Sarah can't afford the lavish wedding they were planning. Last I heard, they postponed it indefinitely. My parents, predictably, didn't see it that way. They blamed me for Sarah's misfortune, conveniently forgetting that it was her own actions that had led to this situation. "You've ruined your sister's life," my mother said during one particularly heated phone call. "Are you happy now?" I took a deep breath, trying to stay calm. "Mom, Sarah and Mark tried to scam me out of thousands of dollars. They lied to everyone, including Mark's parents. How was that my fault?" However, it seemed like speaking with a brick wall. They believed that Sarah was perfect and that it was me, the villain, who had ruined her happiness. My life continued on despite the family turmoil. After the engagement party debacle, I threw myself back into my business and started to restore my clientele. Things began to improve gradually but steadily. I happened to run into Mr. Johnson, the man whose 50th birthday celebration I had to postpone in order to work on Sarah's engagement. One day, as I was heading out of a meeting with a new client, he cried out, "Olivia," with a smile. "How are you doing?" I had a guilty feeling. "I really apologize for abruptly canceling on you, Mr. Johnson. I acted in an unprofessional manner." I apologized, but he waved it off. "That is not necessary. Although your buddy Lisa did a fantastic job organizing the celebration, I must admit that I missed your individual touch." Something occurred to me. "Well, I would love the chance to make it up to you if you're planning any events in the future." Mr. Johnson has glittering eyes. "In actuality, my company is about to celebrate its 25th anniversary. How would you choose to deal with that?" I couldn't help but feel that things were finally improving as I left, contract in hand. Sure, I didn't have the best relationship with my family, but I still had my dignity, and my business was doing well. I was looking over seating arrangements one evening when I heard a loud knock on my flat door. I had no expectation of anyone. I carefully walked up to the door and peered through the spy hole. I was shocked to see Sarah and Mark there. In spite of my better judgment, I let myself in. "Why are you in this place?" Mark followed Sarah as she brashly pushed by me into the flat. "We are going to move in," she declared. Thinking I had misheard, I blinked. "Pardon me?" Sarah remarked, her tone accusing. "You heard me. We lost contact with Mark's parents because of you. Nothing, not even an allowance or cash for the wedding. We therefore made the decision to settle here." I had to admit, I laughed. Their plan's sheer audacity was nearly astounding. You're not serious at all. You can't just decide to move in here. This is my house. With a contorted expression of rage, Mark stepped forward. Oh, Olivia, you owe us. Everything was damaged by you. My patience broke. I have nothing to owe you. You recall trying to con me? Please exit my residence now. Sarah's farewell statement could be heard as I closed the door behind them. You'll regret it. A odd frothy stuff ringed my flat door when I came home from a conference a few days later. It took me a minute to recognize what I was looking at. Foam for construction. Congealed all the way around my door, I was enraged. To replace my locks and remove the foam, I contacted a locksmith service. Mrs. Chen, my neighbor, came over to talk to me as I waited. Olivia, my dear, she uttered, her expression showing anxiety. I witnessed the events. If you need it, I can watch it on video. As expected, the footage from Mrs. Chen's security camera showed Sarah and Mark damaging my door. The video was crystal clear. Equipped with this proof, I proceeded directly to the police station. I asked for a restraining order against Sarah and Mark and filed a report for property damage. Although exhausting, the legal process was ultimately rewarding. For causing damage to my residence, the court fined Sarah and Mark and made them pay for the necessary repairs. More significantly, they were prohibited from approaching me from 500 feet away for the following 2 years. My parents were furious. Not at Sarah, mind you, but at me. When they learned, they were astounded that I had filed a lawsuit against my own sister. My mother bemoaned over the phone. How could you do this to your family? Taking a deep breath, I prepared myself. No, Mother. How could you possibly stand with Sarah in light of everything that she has done? I'm tired of being used as a family scapegoat. I hung up and blocked their phones after that. Severing my family ties was painful, but I felt it was an essential step toward my personal health. I poured myself into work in the ensuing weeks. The anniversary celebration for Mr. Johnson was a huge success, bringing me a ton of new business and excellent feedback. I had a wave of calm as I stood at the rear of the exquisitely adorned hall and observed the visitors having a good time. Though I had lost my family, I had also earned something far more valuable: the ability to stand on my own 2 feet and respect for myself.